A series of crimes in a small farming community left people reeling in shock and fear. As the hunt for the suspects expanded, they turned to the FBI for help. They traveled over 1,000 miles to find the deadly perpetrators before more innocent victims crossed their path. A crime wave swept Iowa like a tornado. It left a trail of robbery, kidnapping, and murder in its wake. And then it moved on. No one knew where. I am Dalton Reese, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI committed its resources to tracking down the suspects. By the time they were identified, they already had a significant lead. The pursuit would take the FBI across 6 states in their efforts to catch the killers. In south-central Iowa, the farming region, rich with crops and livestock, began to stir as dawn became morning. Most farm hands had arrived hours earlier to begin their chores, but one who never missed a shift without calling failed to show that day. Her boss, a nearby farmer, became worried when he called and got no answer. Since she lived alone, he went to check on her. He noticed her pickup truck was not there and the front door was ajar. Inside, he found the lifeless body of his farmhand, Maren Cole. Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Tristan Hale responded to the 911 alert. In 20 years of law enforcement, he had been involved with about 5 or 6 homicides, so it is not something that happens a whole lot in Oskaloosa, Iowa, or Mahaska County. When they went into the living room, they observed Maren Cole's body. She was sitting upright, fully clothed, in a chair. She was leaning over to the left side, and there was blood coming from her head. The sheriff called specialists from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation to process the scene. The middle-aged woman had been shot 4 times at close range while she sat in the chair. Technicians recovered .22 caliber shell casings close to the victim. At her feet, they found her half-eaten breakfast. The absence of wounds on the body indicated the farm hand had put up no struggle, according to Iowa Special Agent Harlan Briggs. The house did not appear to have any forced entry. It looked like someone had just entered the house, either been let in or had gotten in without having to break in. The residence had a lived-in look, but was not ransacked, and there was nothing obviously taken from the residence other than her vehicle was missing from the driveway. The farmer described the victim's vehicle as a late-model dark green pickup truck. Detectives issued a beyond the lookout for the missing truck to all law enforcement in the area. Investigators spoke to her closest neighbor, who lived a quarter-mile down the road. She had noticed something earlier that day when she was on her way to work in the pre-dawn hours. She saw an unfamiliar blue hatchback or station wagon backing out of Mrs. Cole's driveway. But she did not see who was inside, and she did not get the license plate. This vehicle was described as an older, not in very good shape, station wagon-type vehicle, blue in color. The vehicle was not a vehicle that had been seen at the Cole residence before and was not really associated with the Cole residence. And so they felt that it may be, and probably was, a suspect vehicle. As police were talking to the neighbor, an alert came across the police radio. A bank 5 miles away in the hamlet of Gibson had just been robbed. Deputies from 2 counties responded. Because deposits are insured by the federal government, the FBI was called in. The closest field office was 77 miles away in Cedar Rapids. FBI Special Agent Rylan Cole was assigned the case. The small savings bank in Gibson had just opened for business for the first time that day. To the town's population of 70, it has one paved road to the community of Gibson. The rest of the area is surrounded by farmland with a few gravel roads leading away from the community. It would take Agent Cole over an hour to get there. Sheriff's deputies arrived first to secure the crime scene and take witness statements. Bank employees told investigators that the robbery had occurred that morning. They had no customers at the time, and there was no guard on duty. Only a teller and the manager were inside when the robbery took place. 2 armed robbers wearing dark ski masks, gloves, and brown coveralls burst into the bank. One held a shotgun while the other carried a handgun. The robbers scooped stacks of cash and banknotes into plastic trash bags. They had gotten away with $65,000 in cash. Though they wore masks, bank employees believed both men were white males. The Gibson Savings Bank did not have any security system. That is, no video cameras, no film to have recorded the robbery. This makes it difficult for investigators to have some evidence other than witness statements. Investigators found only one person who had seen anything, a 10-year-old girl. She told agents that she had been riding her bike across the street when the robbery occurred. Two men in ski masks holding bags had jumped out of a gray car and had run into the bank. She rode away before the men came out. The girl was either too young or too scared to get the license plate. Police put out an all-points bulletin alerting units to be on the lookout for a gray sedan as a possible getaway vehicle. Agent Cole felt the robbers in this particular case were from the immediate area. First of all, the Gibson Bank is a very isolated location. Second of all, both individuals were wearing coveralls, which are somewhat indigenous to the working people in these communities. The deputy, on his way to the robbery scene, headed for likely routes the bandits would have used to escape. 2.5 miles from the bank, he noticed a gray sedan, apparently abandoned in the middle of a farm field. No one was in sight. He checked the car and radioed in the license plate number. It was registered to a teenager by the name of Sienna Langford, who lived nearby. He thought it was extremely unusual that this vehicle would be sitting where it was. And, knowing that they were only just a couple of miles away, he drove to their house. Iowa communities are tight-knit, and the officer happened to know the Langford family. At the teenager's home, he got no response. The deputy found the front door unlocked. Inside, he discovered 18-year-old Sienna Langford lying on the floor, shot to death. He radioed for assistance. Mahaska County Chief Deputy Tristan Hale felt strongly that this second homicide was likely related to both the first murder and the bank heist. They were relatively sure in their own minds that these were all connected. They were in a 5-mile radius of each other, and again, that is just not something you see a lot of in rural Iowa, where you would have 2 bodies and a bank robbery all within a matter of a couple of hours. The recent high school graduate had been shot twice in the head from close range. An audio cassette and 2 .22 caliber shell casings, the same caliber found at the first murder scene, were recovered close to her body. Like the earlier homicide, investigators found no indication of forced entry and no defensive wounds on the young girl. Iowa Special Agent Harlan Briggs discovered another important connection to the first murder victim, Maren Cole. A neighborhood canvass in the area of the Langfords' residence gave them information that a green pickup truck, newer, in good shape, was seen parked in the Langfords' driveway that morning. That is interesting to them because Maren Cole's pickup is a newer dark green Dodge pickup truck. And so they believe that after her truck was stolen from her residence, it ended up at the Langfords' residence, and that tied the 2 homicides together. Both bodies were sent to the county medical examiner for autopsy. Analysis of the bullets confirmed what investigators had suspected. Each victim had been killed with the same weapon, a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The FBI and local investigators assembled a command center in the Mahaska County Sheriff's Office. They set up a hotline and contacted the media with a description of the farmhand's late-model dark green pickup truck. They occupied a large debriefing room which acted as a command post. They began to collate leads that were coming in from all parts of the community. There was also significant media attention at this point, which increased the volume of phone calls that were coming in. Deputies chased down dozens of leads. One was from a teenager who had seen a green truck that fit the description of the farmhand's pickup. He was in the town of Oskaloosa in the late morning when he noticed the truck drive past with 2 men inside. The witness did not see their faces, and he did not get the license plate. It was not much to go on since that particular truck was so common in the area. They received dozens upon dozens of sightings, most of which turned out to be absolutely nothing. It was just a green 1997 pickup, and everybody that was driving one at some point in time that day in the Mahaska County area was stopped. Everyone except the driver of the murder victim's truck. Investigators fanned out to search the various small towns in Mahaska County for more promising witnesses. They found one who said he noticed something around mid-morning on the day of the crime spree. He saw a dark green pickup truck near the town of Oskaloosa. The witness identified the driver as a local man whom he had never seen in that truck before. He claimed there was a passenger inside, but the truck pulled away before he could see who it was. The individual who reported it recognized the driver of that truck as being Donovan Pryor, a person that he knew and knew well enough to have recognized him and was positive that it was Donovan Pryor. He also said that there was a second individual in the truck, but he could not get a close enough look to tell whether it was even a man or a woman, just that there was a second person in the truck. At the end of the first day, investigators now had the name and face of a possible suspect in the 2 killings and bank robbery. 22-year-old local Donovan Pryor. Agents and detectives hoped they could catch up with him and his unidentified accomplice before any more lives were lost. The day after 2 Iowa residents were killed and the bank was robbed, the FBI and local authorities had the name of a possible suspect, 22-year-old Donovan Pryor. Pryor was last seen driving a green pickup that fit the description of the missing vehicle owned by one of the murdered women. Investigators believe that an unidentified passenger traveling with him may be an accomplice. Special Agent Harlan Briggs of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation learned that Donovan Pryor's last known address was at his parents' home in Oskaloosa, Iowa. His parents were concerned to hear from Agent Briggs because they had not seen their son since the crimes had occurred. When they spoke to friends and family about Donovan Pryor, they found that he had been a good kid, hard worker, but that in the past few months prior to these crimes, his personality had changed somewhat. He had begun to lose weight, that he had stopped working, and that it just appeared that he was having problems. Investigators arrived at Pryor's home to search the house and find out more from his parents. Over the past several weeks, Pryor had been spending a lot of time with his 18-year-old stepbrother, Jalen Voss. Voss lived close by, but the two had different sets of friends and normally did not see each other much. Lately, they had been inseparable. Now both were missing. Because the bank had been robbed by 2 individuals, and because the witness had seen Pryor driving a truck with a second individual, they just had to assume that Jalen Voss was the second person with Donovan Pryor. Detectives interviewed Pryor's friends, who remembered seeing him with Jalen Voss late on the night before the crimes, driving an old blue station wagon. One friend had lent Pryor the car for the past few months since the suspect could not afford one. According to Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Tristan Hale, this vehicle was a blue station wagon which would appear to be a hatchback-type vehicle if you just drove past the back of it. This would also tie in with the vehicle that the neighbor had seen in Maren Cole's driveway earlier that morning. Investigators searched the car but found no evidence that physically connected Pryor or Voss to Maren Cole's murder. Pryor's friends mentioned that he had always wanted a dark green pickup like the victims, but the sticker price was out of his range. Donovan had an infatuation with this particular type of vehicle. Earlier that year, he had one on order that fit the same as what Maren Cole's was, but did not have the money to pay for it, so he canceled the order. His friends added that the day before the murder, Pryor had stopped by with Voss to borrow something else, a .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that he claimed he was going to use to shoot stray cats. The same type of gun was used in both murders. Investigators asked his friends to call immediately if the suspect contacted them for any reason. Authorities learned from several other friends that the suspected murderer had recently been abusing the drug methamphetamine. FBI Special Agent Rylan Cole was concerned about Pryor's mental state since the illegal drug is an addictive stimulant. Abusers of methamphetamine suffer a variety of side effects, one of which is they can be awake for several days. Second is they have loss of appetite, but of a greater concern to law enforcement is they have significantly clouded judgment. They become increasingly paranoid and they may be easily agitated. A widespread manhunt was launched for the stepbrothers in the dark green pickup truck that was still missing. Agents and police also notified additional law enforcement agencies and media outlets throughout the Midwest. Warrants for murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution were issued for Pryor and Voss. Initially, they felt that they had left the state, and they could only speculate as to where. Most of their investigators felt very strongly that they were probably headed for Mexico. Investigators revisited the homes of the pair's friends and family, figuring they would try to contact them. Pryor's ex-girlfriend gave the FBI permission to install a phone tap and recorder. If Pryor called, agents would be ready to trace his location. As the manhunt for Pryor and Voss continued, a call came into the task force office. 2 sets of local parents reported that their teenage daughters were missing. The high school girls, 16 and 17, had not been home since the previous evening. They were best friends and were always together. With 2 killers on the loose, the parents feared for the girls' lives. Investigators discovered that Pryor and Voss had been partying with several girls at a motel in Oskaloosa the night before the crime spree. At the motel, a clerk told investigators the girls had stayed overnight and were still in the room on the morning of the crimes. The employee saw Pryor and Voss with a green truck later on that same day. She said the two girls left with the stepbrothers. Investigators issued another nationwide bulletin that the fugitives Pryor and Voss were last seen in Iowa, traveling with two teenage girls. They were concerned for the safety of the girls. Agent Briggs believed at the time that if Donovan Pryor was willing to kill someone he knew, that the girls may be in danger. Investigators responded to a promising tip that came into the hotline. Pryor and Voss had been spotted at a trailer several miles away from their family home. Investigators had no way of knowing if they were still armed, high on methamphetamine, or if the teenage girls were still with them. Not wanting to take any chances and not knowing their mental state, they had the FBI SWAT team come in. Basically, they surrounded the cabin and came in from several different directions. Heavily armed agents hoped for the best, but were prepared for the worst. Officers yelled for Pryor and Voss to come out. There was no reply. Police teams stormed in ready to use deadly force. The FBI and Iowa investigators stormed a trailer in a remote field on the second day of a nationwide manhunt for 22-year-old Donovan Pryor and his 18-year-old stepbrother, Jalen Voss. The pair were suspected in 2 murders and robbing $65,000 from a bank. 2 missing teenage girls were believed to be with them. Investigators found no trace of the fugitives or the girls. Sightings of the stepbrothers and the stolen green pickup were reported from as far south as Texas to as far north as Minnesota. With $65,000 in cash and a significant lead, Iowa Special Agent Harlan Briggs realized the pair could be anywhere by now. They were unable to really come up with any place that they may go. They had information that they might have gone to Minnesota. They also had information that they may have friends or relatives in Florida, but they did not really have any solid direction of travel where they went. After several days of searching, the FBI got the call they had been hoping for. Agents were ready with a phone tap when Donovan Pryor called his ex-girlfriend. During the call, Pryor asked if authorities had any idea who killed Mrs. Cole and Sienna Langford. He was fishing for information. He was trying to see what they knew and whether they even knew that if they were suspects in the case. And she just told him, "What did you do?" And "Why are they looking for you?" And he became aware quite quickly that he was a suspect and that they did know that they were involved. And he hung up. The agent called his supervisor at the Mahaska County Command Center. FBI Special Agent Rylan Cole learned Pryor had been on the phone long enough to trace his call. After they received the phone call from Pryor, he began the process of trying to track down the number from where he called. At some point, they reached a snag with a phone company outside the area wherein they could not determine or provide the number until the following day. Agents learned that the suspected killer had called from a hotel in Kissimmee, Florida. The employee recognized photos of the 2 fugitives and confirmed the 2 teenage girls were with them, but they had all just left. The phone company's delay had given Pryor and Voss just enough time to stay ahead of law enforcement. Agents were concerned that Pryor and Voss would be more difficult to find now, since they knew the FBI were on their trail. The authorities had missed Pryor and Voss in Florida. The 2 teenage girls who had been traveling with the fugitives returned home safely to their parents. Investigators questioned the girls about the time they spent with Pryor and Voss. The teenagers confirmed that they had stayed with the young men at the Oskaloosa Motel on the night prior to the crimes. The next morning, Pryor and Voss came by in a green pickup with a lot of cash. Pryor, the eldest of the group at 22, offered them a free trip to Florida. The impressionable teenage girls agreed to go with the stepbrothers and did not ask a lot of questions. The girls told them that they were not aware that there had been a homicide, and they were not really aware that there had been a bank robbery as such. But they were aware that something had happened to allow Pryor and Voss to have so much money. The girls told investigators that on their way out of town, they stopped by the Des Moines River. One of the stepbrothers threw a duffel bag into the water, but he never told them what was inside. After that, the 4 of them drove south toward Florida. For the first week of this trip with Pryor and Voss, the girls treated it like it was a vacation. They were having a good time. They were eating out. They were going to amusement parks. One of their first stops was in Branson, Missouri. There, the 4 entertained themselves on carnival rides. The girls said they took photos along the way. They had with them a couple of Instamatic cameras, and they took those cameras and had the film developed, and they had photographs of Pryor and Voss. And one picture in particular is of Jalen Voss sitting in Maren Cole's pickup truck. After their trip to Disney World, the girls said that Pryor and Voss finally confessed to them about the murders and the bank robbery. Voss had dyed his hair blonde to disguise himself. High on methamphetamine, the armed men also told the girls they would not mind killing them as well. The girls were frightened and told the fugitives they wanted to return home. Pryor gave them money for a taxi and train fare back to Iowa. They told investigators they had no idea where the stepbrothers were headed. Investigators concluded the girls were not involved since they remained at the Oskaloosa Motel when the crimes had occurred. They released the teenagers into their parents' custody without filing charges. On the Des Moines River, an off-duty Iowa trooper happened to come across a bag in the water. He opened it to find a pair of black ski masks and brown coveralls. The officer also found a wallet with a driver's license. He contacted police and gave them the evidence. The wallet and driver's license belonged to the murdered Sienna Langford. The clothing matched what the robbers were wearing when they made off with $65,000 in cash from an Iowa bank. Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss remained the prime suspects, and they were still out there, armed and strung out. 19 days after the search for Pryor and Voss began, a call came in to the Escambia County Sheriff's Department in Florida. A motorist in Pensacola wanted to talk to police. He told them he was driving on a nearby highway when he noticed a green pickup. The night before, he had seen a story about the manhunt for Pryor and Voss on television. The truck seemed to fit the description of the fugitives' vehicle. The motorist pulled alongside to get a closer look. I thought the driver looked exactly like the man featured on the show. The truck also had Iowa tags. The motorist pulled off and phoned police. The Escambia County Sheriff's Department realized the motorist's description of the truck matched the one Iowa authorities were looking for. Iowa authorities wanted to be sure this was not just another false lead. It seemed promising, since the suspected murderers were last seen in Florida. They confirmed the license number and sent photos of the stepbrothers to the sheriffs in Pensacola. Iowa investigators alerted them to use caution, since the fugitive pair were considered armed and dangerous. An urgent be on the lookout was issued for the green truck in the Pensacola area. Deputies searched local roads, shopping centers, and motel parking lots for any sign of the fugitives or the stolen green pickup truck. In the parking lot of a local motel, 2 officers spotted a green pickup truck. Motel residents usually park close to their room entrance, but this vehicle was obscured near the back behind a fence. Its Iowa license plate and description checked out. It was the murder victim's stolen truck from Iowa. Authorities had no time to lose if they hoped to bring in the fugitives before they eluded them once again. At a Pensacola, Florida motel authorities had finally located the stolen pickup truck driven by Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss, stepbrothers suspected of 2 murders and a bank robbery in Iowa. Escambia County deputies needed to confirm if the armed fugitives were staying there. The motel clerk recognized the photos of Pryor and Voss, but she added that there was a 3rd man in their room. She gave deputies the room number. Police told her the motel had to be evacuated. Fearing that the stepbrothers had possibly taken a hostage, deputies called in a hostage negotiating team. Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Cale Mercer was in charge. They knew they were armed. They knew that they were murder suspects. They knew they were bank robbers. They were seriously violent criminal individuals. So they got the call out. Their SWAT team and crisis negotiators got the call out, and they responded to the motel. The motel was evacuated. The hostage negotiating team set up an emergency center nearby. SWAT teams took up positions near Pryor and Voss's room. Snipers set up on a nearby roof. No one knew the situation with the 3rd man or his relationship with the stepbrothers. They had no way of knowing if they were all still inside. The negotiator secured the line and attempted to get them on the phone. From the man's tone of voice, the negotiator believed he was likely a hostage. When he made contact with the room, the first individual that he talked to was the hostage himself. He gave him a false name, and he began to try to talk to him a little bit, knowing that was not the correct name, of course, and try to find out what his situation was, what his physical condition was, and what the situation was in the room. The man said he had just met the fugitives hitchhiking and stayed with them to party for a while. The stepbrothers had been awake for almost 4 days high on meth, and now they were finally crashing. The man had since become aware they were murder suspects and that they were still armed, and he was absolutely frightened out of his mind. He did not know what to do, and he knew that they were willing to take life. They had made statements to him that they would not be taken alive, and therefore he was afraid to make any moves because of what they might do to him. The negotiator tried to convince him to leave the room. The rescue team would be at the door when he emerged. While the man considered what to do, Pryor woke up. One of the negotiator's major concerns was the fact that they were known drug users and had been partying for a number of days. When people are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, when it comes to negotiations, one of the things you have to be aware of is how those chemicals can alter a person's personality and alter their reactions. They might be extremely aggressive. Due to their 3-week drug binge, it became clear to the negotiator that the fugitives were not thinking clearly, if at all. His first concern was to get the third man out safely without more bloodshed. Authorities were all too aware that the situation could turn violent quickly. Paramount in his mind was the fact that if they killed 2 already, and both those murders, based on his information, were cold-blooded, calculated murders with no thought given whatsoever to the consequences, that they could easily do that again. After 2 hours, the armed men finally allowed him to leave unharmed. SWAT members spirited the hostage out of the line of fire to where the negotiators continued to work. The hostage said he met the fugitives in New Orleans and had been with them for several days. He said they had a lot of drugs and a lot of cash in the room. They only had 1 handgun as far as he knew. With 2 armed fugitives still barricaded in the motel, a peaceful resolution did not seem likely. Hostage negotiators and a SWAT team surrounded a Pensacola, Florida motel where 2 armed fugitives, wanted for 2 murders and a bank heist in Iowa, remained barricaded inside their room, strung out on drugs. Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Cale Mercer was the lead negotiator. It is the most difficult segment of the negotiations for him. What he should try to overcome is the emotional state that they were in as a result of the drug use, their prolonged activity of being awake for so long, and to try to direct them in a peaceful resolution. He spoke to 18-year-old Jalen Voss for some time. The young fugitive was aware that he was surrounded by police. Sergeant Mercer tried to convince him to do the sensible thing and come out unarmed. But one of the things he was able to learn from Voss was that he was tired, that he was just too physically and mentally exhausted to be making an awful lot of decisions. Worn out. Voss passed the phone to his 22-year-old stepbrother, Donovan Pryor. The negotiator noticed that Pryor seemed more lucid, more mature than his younger brother. He used it as a hook to separate the two. So he told him, "It's obvious to me that you're the one who's running the show in there. I need you to take charge and do something for me." And he said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, what I need you to do is I need you to take care of your brother. I need you to get him out of there." The strategy worked. Pryor did not want his brother to suffer whatever consequences Pryor was going to face by staying in the room. SWAT members secured Jalen Voss. Now only his stepbrother remained. Pryor teetered between indecision and despair. He knew his options were limited. The 22-year-old began to weigh life in prison versus suicide. The negotiator heard what sounded to him like a weapon being charged. It was an automatic pistol that he had in there, so it sounded like somebody had slid the slide back and ejected a shell into the chamber, arming the weapon for firing. It gave him some concern. He passed that information on to their commanders and their SWAT team. Pryor's judgment was clouded. He did not want to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Confused and desperate, he looked to the negotiator for guidance. And the thing that seemed to work the most was constantly reminding him that as long as he was alive, he had some hope. He had a chance. Once he was dead, there was no chance. And that in Iowa, where there was no death penalty, he had an awful lot of years ahead of him to figure this out. Pryor relented to the negotiator's insight. 4 hours after it had begun, the last fugitive walked out of the room unarmed as instructed. The negotiator was able to defuse the situation without death or injury. Agents secured and searched the motel room. They recovered $29,000 in cash of the $65,000 that was stolen. They also found a .22 semi-automatic handgun. On every table rested empty beer bottles, marijuana, and powdered methamphetamine. Ballistics tests later confirmed that .22 was the weapon used to kill the 2 women in Iowa. Authorities questioned the pair separately. Voss told investigators it was his stepbrother's idea to rob the bank. To pull off the heist, they needed a car. Pryor already had his eye on the first victim's pickup truck. the truck he initially wanted to use as the getaway vehicle. Mrs. Cole knew Pryor and allowed the brothers into her house. Once inside, Voss claimed his stepbrother egged him on to kill her. He wanted Mrs. Cole dead so she would not report the vehicle missing. Voss said he shot Maren Cole twice, then again to make sure she was dead. Since Pryor loved her truck so much, he wanted to keep it and steal a different vehicle to use in the robbery. Pryor decided to try another friend of his, Sienna Langford. Like Mrs. Cole, their second victim let Pryor in along with Voss. The pair claimed they needed money for gas. She lent them $5. As she bent over to put a music tape on, Voss told investigators his stepbrother shot her in the back of the head. To make sure she was dead, Pryor shot her again between the eyes. The stepbrothers took Langford's car keys and wallet. Over the next 3 weeks, the pair spent $36,000 on hotels, prostitutes, and drugs before they were apprehended in Pensacola, Florida. Though Iowa had no death penalty, Donovan Pryor, 22, and Jalen Voss, 18, faced the federal death penalty for 2 carjackings resulting in death. They faced another federal charge for bank robbery. To avoid a death sentence, the stepbrothers pled guilty to all federal and state charges. Their convictions left many unanswered questions for the people of Iowa and Mahaska County Chief Deputy Tristan Hale. These 2 guys were as common as any 2 boys next door. He cannot explain why they would go to this extent to get a vehicle and to go on vacation or just to impress a couple of girls. It is just crazy. You would never guess that they would be the 2 type of individuals to do that. Knowing their parents, knowing their backgrounds, it just did not make sense. Donovan Pryor serves the rest of his life in Leavenworth, Kansas. Jalen Voss serves his time in solitary confinement in the tough Supermax Federal Prison in Florence, Colorado.